Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. We're going to be talking about the connected universe coming up next. Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker here with Quarantine Ghost down in the chat room. We just had the special announcement on Edge of the Rabbit Hole a few minutes here ago that Vanessa Hogel, my co-host, will actually be departing Edge of the Rabbit Hole this month. Next week will actually be her last show, and we wish her well in all of her future endeavors. She has a lot on her plate, and she's taking time away from the show to go do those things. So we wish her well for that, for those that missed that announcement on Edge of the Rabbit Hole this evening. So special Edge of the Rabbit Hole coming up next week. We'll give Vanessa a good send-off for that, so be sure to tune in for that. So tonight we're going to be talking about the connected universe, and I've mentioned this term many times on this show. In fact, we have done a connected universe show here on Beyond the Shadows, but we're going to be talking about some things a little different here. We'll get into some other topics. Those that listen to the podcast that I put out yesterday, we'll be talking about some of those things. I know not everybody listens to the audio podcast. They're on Spotify, so we're going to expand upon those things, because that was only like 15 or 20 minutes or whatever. We got an hour-long show tonight, so we have a lot of material to cover. And then on Haunted Road Media, we're going to do like a real compact presentation for that on Friday. But tonight, of course, I'm always willing to take your questions as we dive into this topic. It's something that we've been, between like the Time Traveler, Haunted Road Media video that came out here a couple weeks ago. We just did paradoxes, and really anything that has to do with, ghosts and hauntings. With heck, if you believe in such a thing as a parallel universe, you know that I have my reservations when it comes to multiverse. Parallel universe, maybe. When it comes just to the ground under our feet, or just the way time works, these things are all interconnected together. And what's been really fascinating to me is this, well, many things, honestly, but this image here, and I've shown this many times to you guys that are regulars here. So, but for those that are a little bit new here, this is this is from the Chandra X-ray telescope. And essentially what it is it's a X-ray image of warm, hot intergalactic matter. So what you're seeing here are strands of hot gas expanding out from galaxies. They're just reaching out into space like that. And what happens is that X-rays from supermassive black holes are absorbed by those hot gases near quasars, and Chandra picks up on this sort of activity. Since the universe is actually expanding, the X-rays are stretched as they travel, and it comes off as this web-like image with the X-ray through the Chandra telescope. And so with this, you can see how the universe is interconnected with each other. Now, this is just on a physical level out there in the cosmos. We're not even talking yet as we get into like past lives and things like that, which we will. This is just the universe itself. So this is showing the universe being connected the way it is, which to me, of course, loving this sort of thing is absolutely fascinating to me. So that's the Chandra X-ray part of it, which I won't say it set me down this path, but as I keep diving into this material and into this research, it's one of those things that it's really clicked with me, like, there's an image actually showing the different things that I've actually been researching and discovering, and there are glimpses of it in the book back here, A Walk in the Shadows, my latest book. I have an announcement coming out tomorrow on something regarding that, but so be on the lookout for that on social media tomorrow. But when I was doing the research for that book, I started noticing how so many of these different phenomena are interconnected and related to each other, and it just became a massive rabbit hole that I was tumbling down and kept digging and digging and digging. And one subject led to another, led to another, led to another, and all of these things being absolutely related. I'm talking about like the different interdimensional beings, the way time works, the simulated universe, all these different things being interconnected and meshed together. Really, really fascinating. So I have to throw this out there. So the show Dark. Now this is something that's also really kind of pushed me forward here lately. This particular show, it has really, and I know some people have been watching season 3 here. I've heard from many of you that you've really enjoyed the show and a lot of the material that it covers. It's really a groundbreaking show in the fact that it went really deep into a lot of these different types of topics. And you can even see the tagline right there, everything is connected. They repeated that I don't know how many times during the show. And they took it from a viewpoint of, past, present, future, throughout time, all connected. In fact, they had concepts in there of how the future was influencing the past and things like that. But everybody's lives are connected, and how different actions from one person led to another. You could even get into like butterfly effect type stuff here. Now, there have been other television shows and movies and whatnot that have touched on this. And when I did the Paradox video that I released on Sunday, I touched on a lot of pop culture because that's how I believe people can really relate to it. You see it in like movies Back to the Future, the show Lost, which I actually didn't cover in the Paradox video, but Lost covered a lot of that sort of stuff about people really being connected like that. And they had, especially with season 1, they had the whole 6 degrees of separation thing going on, how all these different people trapped on this island were actually connected in so many different ways before they had actually gotten to the island. And so you see these connections play out throughout our lives. Mentioning the butterfly effect, you're talking, of course, butterfly flaps its wings over here, and it affects so many other things, throughout the world. And this is seriously how the whole world is connected on many, many different levels. And not just, again, that's a physical level, but you start to take into the spirituality, you talk the afterlife. Now think about this, somebody in the afterlife that's in spirit form being able to affect the physical world now, but also in the future and also in the past. There's a lot of different ways these things are connected and tied to each other. And Debbie O8, I enjoyed so much about that show. Thanks for telling us, Mike. She's talking about Dark. It was a fascinating show, and I definitely recommend it for anybody that finds this sort of topic fascinating. When you start getting into time travel, paradoxes, Mandela effect plays into this as well. So I got a question on one of the videos. It was the Paradox video on whether or not the Mandela effect played into any of this. And really, the Mandela effect may be a result of paradoxes that occur in real life. Now, when a paradox happens, the results of that... Okay, think about Back to the Future. If he had gone back, he did go back, but if he had changed his parents' connecting back then, that was the whole big scare, right? That he had interfered with his parents connecting and getting together, so therefore he was going to erase his own existence. and therefore he wouldn't have been. There was the photo of he and his siblings were disappearing. So that would have affected the future. However, there still would have been his existence, at least on a temporary basis, to prevent his parents from ever meeting. So therefore, even though he never actually ended up existing, his existence actually changed the past. So, and prevented that meeting from occurring. So it's really kind of bizarre. But if somebody would have remembered him, like if his mother or father would have actually remembered him, if Biff would have remembered him, whatever, but he didn't actually exist, is that kind of like the Mandela effect playing out right there? Is that it? Because they remember something occurring one way, but it didn't actually happen that way. It actually happened this way. Maybe that could be how this Mandela effect ends up happening, is paradoxes that we don't realize actually happened occur. The universe corrects itself, or it just becomes we don't notice it because time changed, but yet there's still like that vague memory of something being different. So it's a lot to kind of try to get your head around, but that could be how the Mandela effect plays into all of this, as far as the connected universe and paradoxes and what have you. So, yeah, Robert Hanna says, most definitely, if you're at all interested in time travel and paradoxes, check out Dark. Yeah, it's absolutely freaking loaded. Eva Geller reminds me of an old series called Touch, How We're All Connected. I don't recall that series, so I guess I'm going to have to check it out. All right, so that was Dark and all that. I actually have show notes for tonight. Okay, so past lives. So this, we talked a little bit about this on Edge of the Rabbit Hole tonight, past lives. I did want to get into that a bit in this show for this evening. So how past lives connect with us today, with the connected universe. One of the things that I mentioned in the podcast was when we have a deja vu, and I know a deja vu is supposed to be a glitch in the Matrix, right? But really, when we have a deja vu, we walk into a building and it's like, I feel like I've been here before. Have we in a past life? And we connected to that location because that's where we had been previously in another body. Michelle called the body a shell, or what was the other term that she used for it? Armor, right? Trying to give, the soul is something that's in this thing right now. Vanessa calls it a meat sack. So had we in another shell or what have you visit this location before, and is that why it's familiar to us? Is that why when we are drawn to another country, like somebody's like, oh, I've always wanted to go to Italy and visit Rome and Venice, or I'm drawn to Egypt to go see the pyramids, or in for me, and I do want to go see those places, Scotland, go see. Well, for me there, I want to go see Castle Grant because that's in my family lineage. But I want to see the countryside and the castles and all that stuff. Is there a draw for me, not just because of the family lineage, which is a way that I'm connected to those locations, but also, perhaps I had spent a past life at some of these different locations. And it also begs the question, are some of our past lives our ancestors' life? So are we sometimes reincarnations of our ancestors? So do some of these locations call out to me because I was previously there as my great-great-great-great-grandfather or my great-great-great-great-grandmother? Because I believe you can change genders, of course, from one life to another. So is that why we are drawn to some of these different locations? When I was a kid, I'm going to get a little silly here, but when I was a kid, like in third grade, I used to joke around that I was from Pluto. Not necessarily meaning that my physical body life then was from Pluto, but just something about me from, being from Pluto. What was funny was it was sometime last year that a friend of mine on Facebook, and commenting on one of my posts, had said something about how when she was a kid that she used to joke around about being from Pluto. So, and I had to laugh. I was like, oh my God, I used to say that exact same thing, when I was in third grade. Not saying that, we are really from Pluto or anything like that, but is there something about the connection to the universe? And perhaps, maybe 5 million years ago, there was something different about Pluto, and maybe there was a colony or something on there. Who knows? And there had been a past life that had been on Pluto before. I don't know. But apparently there is some connection there for some people to this planet for some reason or another. It could even be a remnant, from another solar system. I've mentioned before, I think it was last week, about how this solar system is probably not, because we don't know for certain, is probably not an original formation, meaning that what we have here now with our sun and these planets was expelled from a previous solar system that had gone through the whole process of, star formation and it changing to the various stages, becoming a, red giant and then exploding and all that stuff, and then, expelled out all the matter and it reformed up into another solar system. Because the universe itself is nearly 14 billion years old. Our solar system is, or our planet in any case, the solar system is going to be a little bit older, but our particular planet is 4.5 billion years old. So you have like 8.5 billion years there to play with. So there are some scientists that do believe that we've gone through all of this before, that this is not our first go around with this matter, that we had already previously been a sun and some planets and all that. Whether it sustained life, we don't know. But at some point we were just dust and dirt out there that formed back up and became a planet. So with that, do we have then a connection to, maybe Pluto had been something, maybe not in this solar system, but in a previous solar system that we may have been a part of? Possibly. We talk about, sometimes we've talked about this on some of our shows about extraterrestrials and life on other planets and what have you, and also in reincarnation. Have we actually had alien lives before? So I talked before about the work from Dolores Cannon, who passed away some years ago. If you've ever read any of her books, they're very fascinating. I've read a couple of hers on her past life regressions, and some of those past life regressions talked about alien lives, that they were having a memory of when they were in an extraterrestrial or an alien on another planet. Now, they wouldn't have been an alien or extraterrestrial to that planet. They're an extraterrestrial or alien to our planet. But basically, they had a life on another planet as a different physical being, and they were remembering that. So some people talk about having actual connections to different stars out in the galaxies. And maybe this is why we're drawn to the stars, why we keep wanting to, strap a bomb to our asses and shoot ourselves off into space, is that we have a connection to the stars and we keep trying to go there, to somewhere, to some place that we have been before. There's a lot of speculation that perhaps beings have come down here from the star system Sirius, that we have this connection with Sirius. There's no way to prove that at the moment, but is that why the ancients were really drawn to Sirius? Is that why other people living today are drawn particularly to that star? Do we really have another connection to there because there has been some sort of past life there. We're obviously, from the image I showed earlier, we are obviously connected to the rest of the universe. But is there something more on a metaphysical level with the soul that is actually connected there as well? So, Victoria Monday, if we can reincarnate as a different sex, can we reincarnate as a different species? Can we be an animal and the next time a human? I don't know if necessarily like like reincarnating as a dog, or a cockroach or a bird or something like that. A lot of those past life regressions that I was reading weren't necessarily as animals like that, but as another sentient being, as like in another planet or something like that. I say that, but I also had, as a kid, a lot of dreams of being an alligator. It might sound silly, but I did question for a long time if I had been an alligator in a previous life. I'm not sure. There are people who believe that yes, we can reincarnate as an animal. There are people who believe that we can reincarnate as a rock. I have a hard time with the idea of reincarnating as a rock. I mean, a dog or a cat or something like that, you can at least get me far enough to consider, might be possible, because they do have a conscience. Obviously, they do. But something like a rock that's an inanimate object that's going to be sitting there in some form for millions and millions of years and, eventually get ground down into like a pebble and a grain of sand. And I mean, it's going to exist on some level. I can't buy that one. But in some other creature that has a conscience, maybe another intelligent life form, like an alien on another planet. Yeah, I buy that one. That we can reincarnate there. You have to keep in mind. I mentioned this on which show was it? Everything's kind of blending together now, but it was when I was talking about the Fermi paradox on the paradox video that I released on the Haunted Road Media channel on Sunday. With the Fermi paradox, it was a question that was thrown out here on Beyond the Shadows last week that I actually did not answer, but did a little research on it. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about now. The idea of that we believe there's all this extraterrestrial life out there without having any evidence to back it up. Just this belief that it must be true because the universe is so big. And the way I presented it was, well, you gotta keep a certain perspective about this. The fact that, to the rest of the universe, we are the extraterrestrials. We are the aliens to the whole rest of the universe. We seem to have like this self-centered attitude about our planet, like we're Earth, so we are it, and everybody else are extraterrestrials. Well, to the extraterrestrials, to somebody from another planet, we are the extraterrestrials. So therefore, you can say there is at least one planet in the Milky Way galaxy that has extraterrestrial life. That's ours. So based on that, we have, was it like 250 billion to 500 billion stars in just the Milky Way galaxy. We're one that has life. There are billions and billions of stars in the galaxy. So if you just kind of do the math on 1 out of every 500 million stars has a planet with life, and you blow that up across the entire universe, well, there you go. Then you have billions of planets that would have life. You have to keep in mind from the perspective of the rest of the universe, which is massive, we are the extraterrestrials. So, all right. So there's some other questions coming in here. Let's see. From Betty Lange. So, Mike, are we a prison planet dropped here from other planets? I don't know. I don't know about that. I think some people like to think that because a lot of times we become our own hell on earth here, right? And there's also the idea of the like the Anunnaki coming down here. wanting gold, and they made a slave species out of us to go ahead and mine their gold, and then they left or went extinct or did whatever they do. There's so many different theories about how all that happened, but prison planet, some people speculate that. There's no way to know. If we are, they're doing a poor job of keeping us from getting off planet, because we've been doing that routinely now for about 50 years. Yeah, and Chris, so what about a tree or a plant? Kind of the same thing as with a rock. It's. I mean, it has life because it grows and it actually gives life as well. But I don't necessarily believe that it has a consciousness. I know that people can make the argument that, well, plants react to music. Yes, it does. I think that has more to do with the vibration of the music than it has to do with a plant rocking out. I don't think it's like Little Shop of Horrors, like, Feed Me Seymour. I don't think it's like that. I think the vibrations of the music affect the plant to be able to do different things. But I don't believe it actually has a consciousness in it. Like, I don't believe a rock has a consciousness in it. You can make a case again for a cat or a dog. And I won't adamantly say no to that. But I think it has to be like a more intelligent being. So, my take. Tom McNicholas, couldn't bacteria be considered a life formation? From a certain point of view, same thing with a plant. But again, bacteria doesn't really have a consciousness. So, it is a living, growing thing, but consciousness is not one of the things it possesses. So, all right. So that's the past life perspective. Well, I guess I'm not totally finished with that, because there are still other things to explore here with past lives. So I mentioned, being drawn to locations. This was one, Mineral Springs. What's interesting about this, so, Connected Universe, it's a project that, because this is Alton, Illinois, project that I was working on, that I'll still complete, but I wasn't able to do this year. I was going to complete it this year, but wasn't able to do because of COVID. It's kind of a shame. Last year it got hurt because of the floods going on there in Illinois, and then this year it was COVID. But throughout that town, it really gave me a great perspective on how locations, people in a small locale over time are really connected to each other. Behind, you can kind of barely see it off to the right, there's the Mississippi River. Straight behind there, there was an island. Excuse me. There was an island out there, and it went through a number of different names, like Sunflower Island. Smallpox Island is the most notorious name for it, because of the fact that from the federal prison there in Alton, the prisoners during the Civil War would be taken from there to the island if they came down with smallpox. Many of them died and were buried there on the island. So many years later, the island was dug up because they put in a dam right there, and many of these bodies ended up floating downriver, and it was just kind of crazy stuff. I mentioned this because there's several connections to that island throughout the rest of the town. So McPike Mansion is big there. McPike ended up owning the island at one point in time, but it's also where Lincoln's duel happened. It is also, there's an amazing ghost story that took place on that island. And so there's all these connections around the town to this island, and then to each other throughout the entire city, spanning like almost 100 years of time, from the prison to the island to McPike to Mineral Springs to all of these different locations and people throughout the town's history. Some of them had never even met each other. It's just really, really fascinating. So it was unfortunately a project that I've had to shelve for the moment. Would love to get back to complete, because I just loved showing all these different connections. So this is, again, the connected universe on a kind of smaller microcosm of a scale in one particular town, and showing all these different connections to each other. So very, very cool stuff. So Betty Lange, is the pandemic connecting our planet together? That's a tough call on the pandemic. Is it connecting? It seems we're more divisive now than we ever have been in many ways. I mean, it might be connecting some people together in a way that our generation hasn't seen. And I will not use the term unprecedented. That drives me nuts. Those, especially early on, we're saying this what's going on right now is unprecedented. It's like, oh, come on. It's just our generation hasn't seen it. Unprecedented. Well, 100 years ago we had the Spanish flu. And I had I guess I thought it was only one great grandmother, but it actually was two of my great grandmothers actually died from the Spanish flu. And of course, there was the Black Plague. Stuff like this has happened over the centuries. This is not new. We just haven't seen it in our generation. The way we're handling it has been an absolute mess. I see it as more divisive than actually connecting all of us. I guess in a way you could say it's connecting some of us, because we've had to, many people have had to stay cooped up together for a while. But like, just take, I don't know, the workplace. I mean, a lot of people are working from home. With my employer, most everybody's working from home, so we're not coming together. We're apart. We get together in the morning for a video call. But yeah, that's really been about it. So yeah, I think it's been more divisive, actually. Tim Schoen, if we reincarnate as another human, do we retain any of our preferences and likes from the previous life? Yeah, great question. So it seems so in some cases that we do carry some of those different things over. There are a lot of people who talk about, like in a past life, if you were shot in the shoulder, that you may come into life with some issues in that shoulder, or maybe even a birthmark where you had been shot. So there's different things like that. I do believe that we connect to our past selves in a number of ways, that, yeah, some of our likes and dislikes and things like that do carry over. But we may acquire new ones in this life as well. So I don't think it's like a one-for-one match from one life to another. Especially if we change genders, I think a lot of things would change in that regard. But yeah, some of those things do come over for sure. So on that note, yeah, there's the stars, and I kind of already talked about this. The other thing I wanted to mention from here with the stars, because I went into the age of the universe, the solar system, the Pluto thing, all that. Panspermia. So this is the idea that matter from the solar system, the rest of the universe, even coming down to our planet and feeding us, whether it's another life form or just an element, a mineral, those sorts of things. Maybe we're getting viruses from outer space. They have found plankton out there on the International Space Station. So life can live to a certain degree out there in space. It seems really odd and bizarre to us because space is a vacuum and there's no oxygen out there. But on some level, some life can survive out there. Now, it does have to survive the entry into the atmosphere, but there are scientists that have shown that things can survive on an entry into the atmosphere and can survive coming down. So, like with the Spanish flu that I mentioned earlier, there is some controversy over the fact that on the exact same day, when the flu kicked off, that it was Boston, and I think it was India, where the Spanish flu first kicked off and started spreading, was in two different cities completely separate from each other on the planet, and boom, yet there it is. So there is some speculation that it actually something that came down out of space, really, out of the solar system onto the planet, landed in two different locations, because you think of the way, it comes in basically on an angle and then wraps around the earth, kind of like what we do with when we land any of the capsules, or when the space shuttle would come in or anything like that. It would have to come in on that trajectory through a window, and depending on which window it came in, you could land on a different place on the planet. And so if you had the same material, and it doesn't take much for something to come in on this part of the planet to over here, as far as the angle to change great miles over the planet. So it's a theory, of course, but that idea that actual virus came in from outside is pretty interesting. So I'm definitely not saying that that's what happened with coronavirus, but it's an idea for the Spanish flu that's what happened. So another example is with the octopus, that it's so vastly different from any other animal that we have on the planet that there are several that actually believe that it is a creature that came in through the idea of panspermia from outside the planet and landed in our oceans, and is the animal that we have today. So it's a very interesting idea that even now, even today, we could be affected through these things coming in through our atmosphere, again, connecting us in a very different way with the rest of the universe right now. So, all right. Let's see what else you guys have down here for questions. Let's see. You guys are talking about the virus down there. Yeah, Alina the Fan, this virus is showing us we need more sustainability and need some more of the simple ways of life back. Mr. CO2, the alien greys have made their move since the quarantine pandemic. There's been some articles on it. Oh, there's a lot of different theories about what extraterrestrials may be contemplating. Whether it's our demise, or maybe this was in the plans all along, or what have you. So I'm going to leave it to your guys' questions for now. I touched on a lot of the different things that I wanted to hit on. Yeah, so I guess a lot of you guys have heard about the idea with the octopus. It's a very interesting idea, but yeah, when it comes to, well, some of this stuff. Okay, so times, dimensions, interdimensional beings, ghosts and hauntings, extraterrestrials, simulated universe. So all these different concepts and ideas. When it comes to time, we talk a lot on here about. Well, I talk about my my stacked time theory and everything happening, past, present, future, all at the same time. If that is true, well, that really connects us, absolutely. So, me sitting here in the studio right now is the same as, 10 years from now. Somebody maybe has their dining room table set up in here. And so I'm actually broadcasting this right now as the same time, kind of relatively speaking, as somebody having their dinner in here. I guess it might be a little late at night. It's 11:35 in the East. But, that would actually connect me to somebody, spending time in their dining room if they were to so use this room for that. In any moment in time that we've had anywhere on the planet, we could be simultaneously sharing it with another person at another point in quote unquote time, if it's all existing at the same. So something I talk about routinely is that moment at Johnny V's where I saw the shadow dart across the room through that door, but I didn't see the door move, but heard the crash of it. And whether or not it was just could be another point in time, could just be another, place in, I guess, in space, whatever. Maybe it was another dimension. And that sound was ever able to resonate because it's on a different wavelength. But, where was that shadow person? Was it actually maybe the shadow or, the image of a human? Maybe it wasn't a, interdimensional shadow person. I use the example for shadow people being interdimensional beings. It could have been an interdimensional being. It could have been another point in time, and I'm seeing the image of that. But I'm connected with that entity in that moment, in that room. And if it was actually another point in time that I saw, then I am connecting to, maybe it was 5 years further down the road, or maybe it was 20 years in the past, or maybe it was just that restaurant in another dimension, and it could have been, I don't know, in the fifth dimension at that time, and it didn't know how to process what it saw with me, and it freaked out and took off. We don't know. I mean, it could have been some people would, we'll talk about parallel universes. Was, were we crossing a parallel universe at that time? And, in the Johnny V's, in the parallel universe, it saw me and flipped out. So kind of like we were talking about dark earlier, that ended up going into parallel universes. They ended up doing their parallel universes kind of like a mirror image in a lot of ways. So was that a parallel universe of where I was at, and it took off. So that's would be me connecting with another dimension. So Judy Wilson, do you think that one day doors can be open and we'd be able to go to from one plane into another? Yeah, I think that is something we are eventually going to be able to do. I mean, there's already the theories right now of, like with wormholes. So if you could bend space and time and, punch a hole from one point to another, then that's the wormhole. The issue is bending space and time to be able to do that. And there's also the issue of being able to punch that hole to be able to do it. So there are steps to be able to get there, but we understand the concepts of making that happen. Where we would go, that's a great question. So right now, the way we view it, you look at a movie like Interstellar, we end up going to another place in the universe. But what if it's not connecting to another place in the universe, but actually connecting to another, maybe it's another point in time on our current existing planet, or perhaps if there are parallel universes, perhaps we end up connecting to that parallel universe and seeing a different version of ourselves. There was a recent study here by the Anita Project down in Antarctica, where in this test that they were doing, particles that were supposed to be running in one direction were actually running in the opposite. And through this test, they believe that they may have been able to show that there is actually an existing parallel universe that is running in reverse time from ours. So if we were able to bend space and time, create that wormhole, and connect to that parallel universe, which would have to exist in another dimension, separate from ours. But if we were able to connect to that, would we end up then in a world that is, I mean, it would be opposite. If it's running opposite of ours right now, so it would be like opposite world. And, and being able to connect to that. It's interesting to think about how that may actually function. So, so Sharon Lane, that makes me wonder what death really is. Is it stacked time? We just shifted to a different time, perhaps. Yeah, that's Sharon. That is I get what you're trying to ask, and I understand that. And it's one place where I'm trying to resolve it with a couple of things that I've thrown out there because, I have my stacked time theory. Everything existing at past, present, future. It's essentially Einstein's space-time continuum. I didn't realize that when I was first coming up with the idea, but it's very, very close to what he was coming up with the space-time continuum. If everything is existing all at the same time, past, present, future, what does that do for something like reincarnation? When we die, if we are reincarnated some years down the road, okay, it's kind of irrelevant if time is stacked. So does that mean then that we are coexisting with multiple versions of ourselves? So if time completely exists, together, past, present, future, is there another version of me from another life running around 100 years from now or 100 years beforehand? And if I was to travel to those different times, would I be able to talk to and interact with my future self or past self as another person entirely, if you understand what I'm saying? So my soul would be in that person in the future or in the past, but yet they would have a different shell, like we were talking about before. That's a lot to try to wrap your head around. It's those two things, because I do believe in both. How do I resolve those two different things? I'm not sure yet. I'm still working on that. So, and Judy Wilson, do you think that might be what we call ghosts? I mean, in a lot of cases, yeah. I think so. So, I've talked about before about people sometimes seeing like a woman in a Victorian dress, and that woman turns and looks at them as if they are the ghosts. I've used the example of Andrea Perrin and her mother seeing the guy sitting down at the dining room table, and they turn and look at Andrea and her mother like, "Would you look at that?" So they obviously saw them, as if they were the ghosts or what have you. So in those cases, it's not really a ghost that they're seeing. They're actually seeing another point in time, and they're seeing the past. But you also have to think the perspective of the other person, so the ghost, the quote-unquote ghost, if they're seeing like Andrea and her mother as a ghost, they're actually seeing a glimpse of the future. So that's where 2 points in time are crossing each other, or if they're coexisting and something is making them at that moment kind of resonate with each other and be able to see each other. Whether I've used the term echo before, it could be something like that. Resonance, maybe they're vibrating the same frequency at that point in time, and then they're able to see each other. It's interesting to think about, and that could be what it is. Maybe each, I don't know, year, moment in time, whatever, is vibrating at a specific frequency, and the world doesn't always work properly. Sometimes there's like those glitches in the matrix, and sometimes those moments will actually vibrate at the same frequency, and they're able to see each other. That might be what it is. Betty Lange, Mike, how do you think that DNA is connecting humans to past times? Great question. So I actually have that as a note here and forgot to actually talk about genetic memory. Genetic memory. Okay, so this is the idea that our DNA within us actually carries with itself memories from our ancestors past. So I do believe that, because sometimes there are times that I make gestures that, I guess my grandfather made, or what have you, unbeknownst to me that he had previously made those gestures. You hear it just kind of in everyday, conversation with family, like, oh, you have your aunt's disposition, or you have, whatever trait from some ancestor or previous person from the family. So these things are kind of, handed down. I'm not just talking about physical traits. I'm talking about the way the person actually acted and their mannerisms and things like that. So can some of these actually play out as memories? Well, it's possible. So that trait or that memory or whatever gets encoded into somebody's DNA. And then that DNA is passed down from generation to generation to generation. And it may not be the next generation that comes out, or the generation after that, but that encoding is still within that DNA. So perhaps a couple generations down the road, great-grandchild, suddenly it turns on for them and they pick up on it. And if memories are able to be encoded in DNA, it's possible that somebody down the road is able to pick up on it. So this is actually separate than something like experiencing a past life. This is actually in the physical being. So this is actually something that's a part of the shell, for lack of a better term, that we've been using, which kind of muddies the waters, really, because it makes a case for that a lot of these different things that may be a past life maybe aren't necessarily a past life, but are some sort of memory from the genetic DNA being passed down. Now, where that doesn't jive is when you have somebody having a memory, or several memories of something that happened to somebody completely unrelated. Then obviously that's a memory of a past life, and they're connecting to that previous life. But in some of these cases, you're picking up things from your ancestors that could just be traveling to you through the DNA, and not necessarily. I did mention before that perhaps sometimes we are, reincarnations of our ancestors. So if genetic memory truly does happen through our DNA, and I believe on certainly some levels it does, are we then is it the genetic DNA? Is it the DNA, the genetic memory that's playing out, or is it that we are a reincarnation of our ancestor? That's where the water starts getting a little muddied, and you're not really going to be sure. Like I said, a lot more obvious if you're having these memories from somebody that's, other side of the world and totally unrelated, whatever. But the ancestors is where it kind of, is a little bit harder to figure out. So fungi memory stored in DNA, not brain cells. Yeah, they've been able to make a case that there are ways in which memories do get imprinted into your DNA. Certainly things like mannerisms, learned behavior, stuff like that, those things get encoded in the DNA. Now, you may not be able to, it might not necessarily be like a memory of your the first kiss with the person you end up marrying and having children and grandchildren with. It might not be something like that. But we talked before about the familiarity of a location or a place, and having that deja vu moment of walking into a building and being like, I've been here before. So there could have been a significant enough impression from the previous person of that location that it was able to be imprinted into their DNA, that every time they walked in there, they had a certain feeling or whatever. It could have been their absolute favorite place to go or what have you. Or especially if it was a place that they lived. We talked about, a foreign country or whatever that, people get drawn to, is that because their ancestors, were from there, and, that desire for that location got imprinted into the DNA and passed on down. They've definitely made a case for that. Yeah. So I think Betty Lang was asking about how do you think DNA is connecting humans to past times. I kind of just, I think I pretty much just defined all that. And define soul. So soul is that thing within us that makes us us. That is basically, that's our spirit. That's our consciousness. That's the thing that, that when we are done with the physical life, that goes on to the ethereal world, that, the thing that carries on that into that afterlife. That invisible being. And there were those tests in the 1800s where they were able to kind of measure that. Nobody has repeated the test, probably because it's completely unethical. But so it's that thing that goes off to wherever that kind of quote unquote home world is. So the thing that makes us us. All right. So let's see, what else do you guys have here? Christopher Stanton, like me, wanted to go to England so bad, like I've been there, and that could very well be. It could very well be that you've had a past life or past lives in England, and have an absolute desire to go home. So, Fungi, they actually found out how much a soul weighed. That's what I'm talking about. It was, I forget the guy's name, but he did it with a few bodies in the 1800s. He measured a slight variation the moment that the person died. The test has not been carried out since then, like I said, probably because it's unethical. But so that case still stands today. Is that real and legit? That the soul actually has a very, very small bit of mass to it. So Dan Brown used that in his Lost Symbol book, which was pretty interesting. So now everybody down there wants to go to the UK. That's funny. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We'll have more coming out on the Connected Universe. We'll really, over all these different topics, when it does come to like the hauntings, anything with, of course, the stars and, you can say quantum mechanics, the dimensions, time, really anything that we've been talking about on this show, on the Edge of the Rabbit Hole channel, on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, all these different things are connected together some way, shape, or form. But there's bigger overarching concepts that bring all of these things together. And so we're going to be talking a lot about those concepts here coming up. And we have been, like I said, with time travel, with the paradoxes, all that sort of stuff, the Mandela effect, all these things are coming together. And so we'll have on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, we'll have that kind of condensed, compact show coming up for you here at the end of the week. Trying to get that out for Friday, get back on a regular schedule. And the topics that we'll be discussing here coming up will go more down this road. Of course, we will continue to talk about the ghosts and hauntings and all that because it's all part of it. But other ideas and concepts and topics as well. So be on the lookout for all that. All right, so I do want to thank Quarantine Ghost for moderating the chat down there. For haunting the chat. There we go. Quarantine Ghost is haunting the chat. Appreciate that. So let's get to the participants tab. Give you guys, first I have to do the Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons: Tom McNicholas, B3 Aerospace, Pamela Queen, Joe Chandler, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, and David Isley. Thank you all very, very much for being our Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Our participants tab. So let's go here. So Bella Rose, thanks for joining us tonight. There's Betty Lange, grand old folks, appreciate it. Kathy Salento and Chris's Paranormal Explorations, thanks for joining us once again. Christopher Stanton and Alina the Fam, thank you all very much. Eva Gellert And Helen Espinoza. Joy H., thanks for joining us. Mr. CO2, thanks for joining us once again. Nick Millet, good to see you down there, buddy. Fungi, thanks for joining us. Robert Hanna, thank you as well. Rosella C. Rell, appreciate it very much. Sharon Lane, and I do appreciate the questions from everybody. There's Tammy Heitzman and Tom McNicholas. I also want to throw shout out to Diane Hilbert, Guha, and those that are usually here and their names aren't coming up. See if there's anybody else here. I'll kind of scroll through here real quick. And if I didn't mention your name, of course, try to get to everybody, but it is kind of difficult to pick everybody out of, because the participants tab isn't all inclusive for whatever reason, and then I have to scroll through everything and try to see, did I mention them or not? I mean, it's just awkward. I know Adam Tiller is probably still lurking in there somewhere. Yep, there he is. Good show. All right. And Sharon Lane, yes, Clan Grant. There we go. All right, everybody, you guys have a great rest of the week. Till next time. Yeah, and Tim Schoen. There you go. You didn't show up in the participants tab, buddy, and you weren't in the chat. So, all right. And there's Katie Palmer lurking. All right. So, all those lurkers, you got to come out at the last minute. So, great to see y'all. So, have a great week.